The wind that night was dry enough to cut a man's throat. Wyoming, summer of 1876. Land of dust, thunderless skies, and the far-off whine of coyotes. Cole Hartley rode slow, his hat pulled low, the moon a thin hook catching the edge of his cheekbone. Dustfire's hooves rang hollow against the hardpan. Then he heard it. A sound too human to be the wind, too soft to be a cry for help. A sob, faint, strangled, swallowed by fear. He reined in without thinking. Maybe he'd imagined it, but something inside him said he hadn't. Cole had heard that kind of silence before, the kind that came after a woman learned not to speak. He turned Dustfire toward the sound, down the draw where the land narrowed into a gully called Ronco Duck by the ranch hands. Lonely ravine, a place the rain never visited twice. The smell of rust and pine needles hung low. His dog, Patch, trotted ahead, nose twitching, tail stiff. Then Cole saw it. A shack, half buried in shadow, the door chained shut with an old iron lock that gleamed faintly under the moon. He slid off the saddle, boots sinking in sand. "Hello?" His voice didn't echo. The only reply was a soft, broken breath from inside. He stepped closer. The planks trembled once, like the shack itself was afraid to be found. "Don't!" The word came out like a cough. Cole froze. "You hurt?" A pause. Then, "He'll come back." He could smell fear now, sharp as metal. He took out his knife, wedged it under the lock, pried until the chain screamed. The door gave, slow and stubborn, like something that didn't want to let go of what it was holding. Inside, a lantern had long gone cold. A figure crouched in the corner, arms around her knees, hair tangled, skin marked by bruises that told stories no one should have to tell. Cole set the knife down first, palms open. "You're safe now," he said, though he wasn't sure it was true. She didn't look up. Her breath came in little hiccups, her voice thin as paper. "If he finds me, he'll kill me." Cole's jaw tightened. "Who?" "Silas Bram," she whispered. The name felt like a curse meant to stick in the throat. Cole knew that name. The merchant who owned half the supply routes between Casper and Cheyenne. The kind of man who smiled in church and spat in private. His pulse slowed to something heavy, deliberate. "He won't find you tonight." He reached for his canteen, poured water into the cap, and set it down within her reach. She didn't take it. Only when he turned his back did he hear the faint clink of metal as she drank. Outside, the moon climbed higher, cold and steady. Patch whined. Cole looked at the open land. Empty, silvered, endless. He'd seen bad men in his life. Men who mistook possession for love, silence for obedience. But the way this woman shook, it wasn't just fear of a man. It was fear that the world would believe him. He spoke softly over his shoulder. "Got a horse. She's gentle. Name's Juniper. We can leave before dawn." The woman's hands tightened on her knees. You shouldn't help me, she said. They'll come for you too. Cole almost smiled, though there was no humor in it. Wouldn't be the first time someone tried. For a moment, the only sound was wind slipping through the cracks, brushing the walls like a ghostly sigh. Then, faintly, from somewhere far off, came the glimmer of a lantern. Moving, stopping, moving again. Cole turned toward the ridge. Someone else was out there. He stepped outside, hand on Dustfire's reins, eyes narrowed at the distant light. Maybe a traveler. Maybe not. Either way, he felt the old stillness settle in, the kind that comes before the first wrong move. Behind him, the woman's voice wavered once more, soft as smoke. "My name's Mara," she said. "At least it used to be." Cole didn't answer. He only looked toward that flickering light on the hill and thought, the night just got longer than I planned. Dawn hadn't come yet, but the dark had softened. The shack stood open now, door creaking in the early wind. Cole poured water over the lock, washing away the rust like it could wash away what had been done here. Mara sat on the ground just outside, blanket over her shoulders, her bare feet pale against the dust. Her hair stuck in clumps, streaked with straw and blood that had dried to the color of rust. Cole didn't speak. He knew better than to fill silence that still had meaning in it. He checked Dustfire's saddle, packed an extra coat, then reached for the reins of the second horse. "You can ride Juniper," he said. "She's steady, but she'll test you first." Mara's eyes lifted for the first time, gray, unfocused, as if she had to remember how to see. "I can walk." Cole shook his head. "Not through the ridge. Not with whoever's out there." Patch barked once, short and nervous. On the ridge above them, the light had vanished, but a faint trail of boot prints marked the loose dirt. Too fresh, too heavy to belong to just one man. Cole glanced that way once, then swung into the saddle. "Come on," he said, his tone quiet but certain. "You stay here, and he wins again." Mara hesitated, fingers clenching around the blanket. The word "again" caught her breath. She didn't argue after that. With a small movement, she took the hand he offered, not for balance, but because it had been too long since someone reached toward her without taking something away. When Juniper started forward, Mara clung to the saddle horn, her whole body trembling. Cole slowed his pace, letting the rhythm of the horse settle her. Wind brushed through the dry grass, carrying the smell of pine pitch and smoke. Somewhere far off, a wolf howled once, sharp and lonely. They rode until the shack was only a shadow swallowed by distance. Mara turned once to look back. The door still swayed open, tapping the frame as if calling her name in some broken rhythm. Cole noticed, but said nothing. He'd seen men look back like that, at graves, at towns that no longer wanted them. After a long mile, he spoke. "You got kin anywhere?" She took too long to answer. "I had," she said finally, "a sister." Then softer, "He said she'd be taken from me if I ever left." Cole's hands tightened around the reins, leather creaking under his grip. He didn't press further. The road wound into the foothills, where the morning light began to paint the stones gold. He remembered another night, years ago the war barely ended, when he'd carried a wounded boy off the field. The boy had begged him to promise something. "Don't let me die where no one knows my name." Cole hadn't saved him, but he'd buried him under a juniper tree and carved the name Luke into the bark. Since then, the smell of juniper had meant something more than just a tree. Now, as juniper's hooves struck the stone path, he wondered if fate had any mercy left for those who'd already spent it. Mara broke the silence. "You shouldn't help me." He didn't look at her. "I ain't helping you," he said. "I'm doing what a man ought to." Her mouth trembled. "There's no such thing anymore." Cole gave a faint, tired smile. "Maybe not in town." The wind picked up again, carrying the sound of thunder from somewhere deep in the range. Not real thunder. Wagon wheels, maybe. Or men riding fast. Cole turned in his saddle, scanning the slope. The land here was open, too exposed for hiding. "Hold tight," he said, urging Dustfire faster. The horses broke into a slow gallop, the cold air slicing past them. Dust rose behind, glowing in the rising light like smoke from an invisible fire. By the time they reached the line of pines, the noise had faded. Maybe it had been nothing. Maybe not. Cole slowed, breathing steady but deep. Mara leaned forward, her forehead resting briefly on the horse's neck. Her whisper came so soft he almost didn't hear it. "I don't even remember what quiet feels like." Cole didn't answer. The first beam of sunlight broke over the ridge, setting the tips of the pines ablaze. It lit the chain mark still bruised around her wrist, and he turned his gaze away, jaw tight. Some things shouldn't ever have to meet the daylight. They rode in silence until they reached the bend where the trail split. One way leading toward the mountains, the other toward his cabin on the slope. Cole stopped there, weighing both. Behind them, the air hung too still, the way it does before trouble breathes again. He looked over his shoulder. In the far distance, where the ravine curved into shadow, a faint reflection blinked once, like sunlight off metal, a rifle barrel maybe, or just the morning playing tricks. Cole didn't wait to find out. "We're heading to my place," he said. "Safer there." Mara didn't argue. She looked back one last time, eyes dark with something between dread and disbelief, as if she still expected the world to punish her for breathing. By the time the cabin came into view, the light behind them was gone. But on the ridge they'd left behind, a single crow lifted off the shack's roof, circled twice, then flew north, toward town. By the time they reached the ridge, dawn had spilled over the land like a slow fire. The valley below lay silver and quiet, the pines catching the first heat of morning. Cole's cabin stood where the slope met the forest, a small square of smoke and wood against the pale sky. It wasn't much. 2 rooms, 1 stove, and a porch built out of stubbornness, but it was enough to keep the wind out and the heart steady. Mara slid off Juniper, knees unsteady. Her breath came sharp, like every inhale still carried a warning. Cole tied the horses, gave her space. You'll be safe here for a while, he said. His voice was even, like a man stating fact, not promise. Inside, the air smelled of pine sap and bread gone cold. The small stove still held coals from the night before. He struck a match, lit the flame, and the room began to glow in that soft orange that made even silence feel like company. Mara stood by the door, eyes darting across the walls. There were no pictures, no ornaments, only what a man needed to keep living. She looked at the boots by the cot, the hat on the peg, the rifle resting easy above the mantel. You live here alone? Cole nodded once. Easier that way. He poured water into a tin basin, pushed it toward her. You can wash. There's clean clothes in that chest. Ain't much, but they'll fit close enough. She hesitated before setting the blanket aside. Her arms were covered in bruises, the color of fading violets. She dipped her hands into the cold water. The sound of it, gentle and steady, filled the cabin like a prayer being whispered. Outside, Patch barked twice. Then came the rhythm of boots on dirt. Cole's hand moved toward his gun before the second knock. 3 slow, certain taps. Nothing rushed. He opened the door. "Taya," he said. The woman outside grinned, though her eyes missed nothing. Taya Crow, skin tanned deep from sun and wind, braids tied with feathers dark as night. She carried a pouch on her belt, and the quiet of someone who could track a shadow through snow. Pitch. First. Didn't expect to see you this far east, Cole said. Didn't expect to smell blood this early in the day, she answered. Her gaze flicked to Mara, then softened. You found her. Found her locked up. Taya stepped inside, placed her hand gently on Mara's shoulder. You're safe now, she said, low but sure. Then, turning to Cole, you know Bram won't stop. He owns half the deputies in Cheyenne. Cole stirred the coals, watching the flames catch. Then we don't let him find what he's looking for. Taya crouched, opened her pouch. Dried herbs, bandages, small glass bottles. Hold still, she told Mara. The salve she spread smelled of cedar and rain. Pain'll ease soon. Mara flinched when the cloth touched her skin. Why are you helping me? Because he would, Taya said, nodding toward Cole. And because I remember what it's like to hide a name. Mara's breath trembled. The words slid into her like warm light through a crack. Cole poured coffee into 3 mugs, handed one to each. The first sip made Mara close her eyes, like she hadn't tasted warmth in months. Taya spoke again. There's a way through the river bend. Devil's Rafter. Current's rough, but it hides things well. Bodies, wagons, secrets. Cole nodded slowly. You're thinking what I'm thinking. We make him believe she's gone, Taya said. Mara's head snapped up. Gone? Taya met her gaze, steady and kind. Sometimes disappearing is the only way to live. Mara looked down at her hands, the scars crossing her wrists like thin, pale rivers. She rubbed them gently, as if trying to erase what they meant. The room fell quiet again, except for the soft crackle of the fire and the steady breath of three people who understood silence too well. Cole reached for the window latch, opened it slightly. The air outside was sharp, alive with the smell of pine. "We'll need a sign," he murmured. "Something he can find, something he'll believe." Taya tapped her temple. "Leave that to me." She turned toward the door. "I'll bring what we need by nightfall." As she stepped out, the wind rushed in, stirring the blanket around Mara's shoulders. Cole looked at her then, not as a stranger or a burden, but as someone caught between breaking and beginning. "You got a choice now," he said quietly. "You can keep running, or you can start living under a name that don't hurt to hear." Her eyes lifted to his, gray meeting brown, both weathered by things they wouldn't name. She nodded once, almost imperceptibly. Outside, Taya's footsteps faded into the woods. The door swung once, then closed. And somewhere in the stillness, far beyond the pines, a crow cried out. A sharp, lonely sound that echoed long after it should have died. By dusk, the hills had turned the color of burnt honey. Smoke from the stove coiled out of Cole's chimney, thin and blue against the rising stars. Taya returned as promised, her horse slick with sweat and dust. She swung down without a word, tossed a small canvas satchel onto the table, and unwrapped it. Inside lay a pair of torn gloves, a woman's hair ribbon, and a cracked silver locket. Cole poured coffee for her, the air thick with the scent of cedar smoke and dusk. "That'll be enough?" "Enough for a man who wants to believe he found what he was looking for," Taya said. She leaned on the table, eyes narrowed. "Jonah Pike's still deputy in Cheyenne. He owes Bram money and owes me a favor. If we play this right, he'll be the one to find her." Mara sat quietly near the fire, her knees pulled close, hands clasped around the mug. The word "her" still felt strange, like it belonged to someone else entirely. Cole turned toward her. "You ever thought about a name? One that's yours, not his." She blinked, startled. "A name?" Taya smiled faintly. "A woman's first breath is the one she takes herself. You might as well choose what the world calls it." Mara's eyes fell to the locket, lying open on the table. Inside was a faded painting of some stranger's child. Unknown. Lost. "What name would sound like a beginning?" she asked softly. Cole stepped to the door and pushed it open. Outside, the field sloped down toward a narrow valley where dusk gathered like smoke. A few larks darted between the low grass, their calls trembling in the cooling air. "Down there," he said. "That hollow's called Vale of Larks. Place I go when I need to remember there's still gentleness in this land." He turned back, eyes meeting hers. "Maybe. Aria Vale." She repeated it, slow and careful, tasting the syllables like a strange fruit. "Aria Vale." The sound made her chest ache, half pain, half release. Taya's voice softened. "Aria means song, doesn't it?" Cole nodded. "That's what my mother used to say. A song carried far enough can change its sound, but not its heart." "Mara," No, Arya. Set her mug down. For a long while, no one spoke. The firelight climbed the walls, touching the rifle stock, the edge of Cole's jaw, the rim of her cup. Somewhere in that quiet, something small shifted, the first thread of trust, fine as smoke. Taya began sorting through the satchel. Tomorrow, before sunrise, we ride to Devil's Rafter. Cole will take her halfway down the gorge. I'll set the scene. Scraps of cloth, boot prints, a few drops of horse blood on the rocks. Jonah will make sure the report goes through proper channels. After that, Arya Vale can go wherever she pleases. Arya's fingers twitched. You make it sound easy. It ain't, Taya said gently. But it's cleaner than running for the rest of your life. Cole reached for his coat. You'll ride Juniper. She knows the trail. Keep low and quiet. Arya looked up, eyes wet but steady. And what about after? When no one's chasing me anymore? Cole hesitated. Then you'll decide what kind of silence you want. The kind that traps you, or the kind that frees you. She held his gaze a heartbeat longer than before. It wasn't courage yet, but it was the start of it. Taya tied the satchel shut and slung it over her shoulder. I'll sleep in the barn, she said. You two get some rest. Tomorrow will come early. After she left, the cabin felt larger somehow, the silence softer. Arya sat near the window, watching the stars rise between the black spines of the pines. Cole leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. He said quietly, Whatever you were before tonight, Mara Quinn, wife of a merchant, ghost in a locked shed, that's gone. She didn't flinch. Then what am I now? He took a breath that felt heavier than words. Someone with a name that means something again. Outside, Juniper shifted in her stall, snorting softly, as if answering a question only horses understand. Arya closed her eyes, listening. She felt the tremor in her chest settle for the first time in months. Through the thin walls the wind rose, brushing against the shutters like fingertips on skin. Cole reached to secure them, but paused halfway, listening too. Somewhere in the distance, the echo of a wagon chain clattered once, faint but unmistakable. Cole's eyes met hers. Neither spoke. The night held its breath. The first light came pale and trembling, caught in the frost that still clung to the window. Juniper's breath rose white in the cold air as Cole tightened the saddle straps. Arya stood in the doorway, a shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. She looked small, but there was something different in her eyes now. A kind of quiet defiance, like a flame that had decided to live no matter how thin the wind. Taya checked the satchel again, making sure each detail of their ruse would hold. The torn glove, the bloodied cloth, a strand of hair wound tight in twine. We'll make it real enough to fool God himself, she said, half under her breath. Cole didn't answer. He was watching Arya, waiting for her to breathe steady. When she met his gaze, she gave a short nod. They rode east, the trail twisting through the thinning pines, down toward the narrow canyon that split the land. Devil's Rafter. The air there smelled of wet stone and sorrow. A hawk circled high, the sound of its cry swallowed by the cliffs. Taya rode ahead, sure-footed as the wind. When they reached the ledge, she swung down and began her work, scattering scraps of cloth, pressing boot prints into the damp earth, dipping a rag into a flask of horse blood, and letting it fall in careful drops near the edge. Every motion was precise, almost reverent. Arya dismounted and walked to the precipice. The river far below churned like a restless ghost. The sound filled the air, endless, consuming. Cole stood a few paces back, his hat low, his hands resting on his belt. He wanted to speak, but didn't know how to start. Arya's voice broke the silence first. "He used to tell me crying was a kind of betrayal," she said quietly. "That noise was shame, so I learned to weep into my hands, without sound." Her eyes stayed fixed on the water. "But that night, when I screamed, it wasn't for me. It was for Ivy." Cole frowned. "Your sister?" She nodded. "She's 16. I kept quiet because he said if I didn't, he'd send her away, far east, somewhere I'd never find her. So I stayed, and I smiled when people looked. I told them I was fine." Her voice wavered, thin as the river mist. "That scream, it wasn't me breaking. It was me remembering she still existed." Cole's chest tightened. He stepped closer, not touching her, just standing near enough that his warmth reached her shoulders. "You did what you had to," he said softly. She shook her head. "No, I lived with him. That was my sin, the kind that doesn't wash off." Taya's voice came from behind. "You didn't live. You endured. There's a difference." Arya turned, eyes bright with something raw. "Then what am I doing now?" Cole looked toward the rising sun, low and red over the ridge. "You're trying to live. That's all any of us can do." The wind picked up, lifting strands of her hair. She looked back toward the gorge where Taya had finished setting the scene. The blood looked real, too real. The glove lay torn on the rock. "That's my death, right there," Arya whispered. "And your life waiting on the other side," Taya replied. Cole reached into his coat pocket and drew out a small copper coin, worn and smooth. "Keep this," he said, placing it in her hand. "Had it since the war. Carried me through some ugly nights." She closed her fingers around it, feeling its weight. "You still believe it keeps you safe?" He smiled faintly. "No, but it reminds me I survived when I shouldn't have." For a long time, none of them spoke. The wind whispered through the canyon, carrying the faint scent of rain. Finally, Taya swung into her saddle. "Jonah will be here by dusk. He'll do what's needed. You two best ride north before the sun drops." Arya mounted Juniper again. She didn't look back this time. When the trail curved away, the canyon vanished, behind the trees, taking her old life with it. Cole rode beside her, silent, thoughtful. Every so often he'd glance her way, as if making sure she didn't disappear like smoke. At a clearing, they stopped to water the horses. Arya cupped her hands, let the cold stream run through her fingers. "It feels different," she said quietly. "The water." Cole crouched beside her. "Why?" "It doesn't sting anymore." He didn't answer, just watched the current slide away under the sunlight. A hawk cried again, higher this time, and Arya tilted her head. "What happens to the girl who died in that gorge?" Cole looked at her, the corners of his mouth soft. "She stays buried where she can't be hurt again." She nodded, but the tremor in her hands didn't stop. "And if he finds the body?" "He won't." She stared at him, searching for something in his eyes, then finally whispered, "Thank you." Cole didn't say, "You're welcome." He just picked up a stick and broke it in half, tossed both pieces into the stream. "That's the past," he said. "Let the current take it." They mounted up again, riding until the trees swallowed the last glimpse of Devil's Rafter. The sun had climbed high, the air dry and sharp. Behind them, in the canyon, the wind shifted the glove slightly. A single drop of red trickled off the rock and vanished into the roaring water below. Gone, but not forgotten. By evening, the light had thinned to copper. Cole and Arya stopped by a stand of aspens where the wind sang through pale leaves like breath. They made a small fire, careful to keep it low. Smoke rose straight up, vanishing quick in the chill air. The day had been long, heavy with silence that said more than words. Arya sat close to the flames, rubbing warmth into her hands. Her hair had come loose. A few strands caught the firelight like thin threads of gold. She looked less like a ghost now, more like someone trying to remember her own face. Cole fed another stick into the fire. "We'll ride north tomorrow," he said. "Ty'll meet us past the ridge." Arya nodded. "Will Jonah come?" "He'll come," Cole said. "He's the kind who keeps his debts, even when it costs him." A voice answered from the dark, steady and rough. "You give me too much credit, Hartley." Cole turned, hand dropping to his gun out of habit, but relaxed when he saw the figure step into the light. Jonah Pike. His coat was dusted with road grit, hat low over a face lined by too many nights awake. His badge caught the firelight, dull brass glinting once before he covered it with his palm. "You rode fast," Cole said. "Had to," Jonah replied. "Bram's already talking to the sheriff. He's stirring trouble." Arya stiffened. "He believes I'm dead?" Jonah studied her, the kind of long look that measures truth and pain in the same breath. "He will," he said quietly. "After tonight." He crouched near the fire, holding his hands out to the heat. For a moment, none of them spoke. The only sound was the hiss of pine sap popping in the flame. Jonah's voice dropped low. "I owe that man a debt I can't pay with money. Years ago, I looked away when he hurt someone. My sister, Ella. She didn't survive it." His throat worked around the words like they were glass. "I told myself I didn't see. That's what cowards do." Cole stared into the fire. You see now, though. Jonah gave a short, bitter laugh. Too late for her. Maybe not for this one. He looked at Arya. You don't have to thank me. I'm not doing this for you. Arya's eyes glistened, but her voice was steady. Then for who? For the kind of man I wish I'd been, Jonah said. Back then. The silence that followed felt heavy, but not cruel. Cole broke it by handing him a tin cup of coffee. Jonah took it, nodded once. Tomorrow morning, I'll take what Taya left in the gorge. I'll file the report myself. Bram will grieve for 2 days. Then he'll move on to the next woman foolish enough to trust him. The world will believe you drowned. Arya whispered. And you? I'll keep quiet, Jonah said. Quiet's the only thing I ever learned to do right. Cole stared at him. Quiet can't always fix what noise broke. Jonah's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Maybe not, but sometimes it keeps people alive. A cold gust swept through the clearing, scattering ash. The horses shifted uneasily. Cole stood, watching the dark ridge beyond the trees. We'll ride at first light. You be careful heading back. Jonah rose, adjusting his coat. I'll leave before the moon's gone. He hesitated, then said, Hartley, watch her. The man she ran from isn't the kind that forgets. I will. Jonah's eyes lingered on Arya one last time. Don't waste the life he's buying you, he said quietly. Not everyone gets a second one. Then he walked away, his steps fading into the whisper of leaves. When he was gone, Arya sat still, staring at the spot where his shadow had vanished. The fire crackled, low and uneven. He lost his sister because of Bram, she murmured. Cole nodded. And now he's trying to save someone else's. Arya drew her knees up, wrapping her arms around them. You think forgiveness ever finds men like him? Cole looked into the flames. Maybe forgiveness isn't found, he said. Maybe it's built, one choice at a time. A long moment passed. Then she leaned forward, her voice barely a whisper. If I ever see my sister again, I'll tell her that. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached for a log, pushed it deeper into the coals. The fire flared bright, then settled back into a soft, breathing glow. Above them, the stars began to show through the dark. The night smelled of rain, though no clouds crossed the sky. Far off, a single coyote called. The sound stretched, lonely and long, and Cole knew by the weight in his chest that what waited ahead would demand more than silence and pity. He looked at Arya, at the way her shoulders had stopped shaking, how she watched the fire instead of the dark. Something inside him eased. Not hope yet, but maybe the start of it. Then, from deep in the trees, a branch snapped, sharp, deliberate. The horses snorted, restless. Cole stood, hand already on his revolver, scanning the shadows. The firelight caught the edge of his jaw, and for an instant, Arya saw in him the man he must have been before, one who'd seen too much and still chose to stay kind. The wind carried a faint metallic scent. Cole whispered, We're not alone. The rain came sudden, like a curtain ripped open by the sky. One moment, the air was still and sharp. The next, thunder rolled across the ridge and swallowed their words. Cole urged Dustfire ahead, his hat dripping, his shoulders soaked through. Arya clung to Juniper's reins, her hair plastered to her face, eyes half closed against the wind. The storm wasn't loud. It was furious, a voice older than men. They spotted the shack just as the rain turned to needles. Cole shouted, barely heard, "Line shack! Keep close!" He swung down first, threw the door open, and the smell of old hay and wet wood wrapped around them like a sigh. Inside it was dark, but dry. Water ran down their coats in thin rivers. Cole struck a match, lit a small lantern, and the room filled with a trembling amber glow. A narrow cot, a broken chair, a shelf with a tin of coffee gone stale. That was all. But for now, it was sanctuary. Arya stood near the door, breathing fast. Her hands shook as she brushed hair from her eyes. Cole poured a bit of coffee into a pot, set it on the small iron stove. The hiss of water against heat was the first kind sound they'd heard in hours. "You can sit," he said. She didn't move. "He used to lock me in places like this," she murmured. Cole froze. The words weren't sharp. They were fragile, like glass cracking under its own weight. "You're not locked now," he said quietly. "I know," she whispered. But her fingers touched the latch anyway, testing it, as if to make sure the door would still open. Cole turned away, gave her space. He took off his coat, wrung the water out, hung it by the stove. "There's dry shirts in my pack," he said, keeping his tone even. "You can change. I'll turn my back." For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, the soft rustle of cloth, the faint clink of buttons. Cole stared at the flame, eyes fixed, jaw tight. He thought of nothing, and everything. The weight of silence, the cost of being trusted by someone who didn't know how anymore. When she spoke again, her voice was steadier. "You said you fought in the war." "I did." "Did you win?" Cole gave a dry laugh, low and without humor. "Nobody wins those kinds of fights. You just come home breathing, and that's supposed to be enough." Arya's eyes softened. "Then maybe we're both still fighting." He turned then, met her gaze. In the lantern light, her face looked different, less broken, more real. There was color in her cheeks again, a spark where only exhaustion had lived before. Outside, thunder rolled closer, rattling the roof beams. Juniper neighed in the lean-to, restless. Cole crossed to the door, checked the latch, then stood still, listening. Through the storm's roar, something else moved. A rhythm faint but certain. Hoofbeats. He looked back at Arya, one finger to his lips. The sound faded, swallowed by the wind. Then came again, farther away this time. A single rider, maybe two. "Could be hunters," he whispered. "Or him," she said. The way she said it chilled him more than the rain ever could. He waited, counted the seconds between thunder. When silence came again, he closed the lantern's lid, dimming the light to a flicker. "We'll stay here till morning. Storm will hide us." Arya nodded, her hands tight around the mug he'd handed her. As the hours stretched, the fury of the rain softened to a steady rhythm. She sat on the cot, wrapped in his coat. Cole took the floor near the door, gun within reach. At some point, she whispered, "Do you ever get used to the dark?" He didn't look up. "No," he said. "You just stop thinking it's out to get you." The words hung between them, quiet as prayer. Outside, lightning flared, and for one heartbeat, the whole world was white. Trees, roof, the line shack itself, floating in a sea of light. Then darkness fell back, deeper than before. Arya's breath trembled. "What if they find us?" Cole kept his voice calm. "Then they'll find two people who aren't running anymore." She looked at him, really looked, and something in her expression eased. The fear bent, but didn't break. Minutes later, she shifted closer, her shoulder barely brushing his arm. Neither spoke. The rain softened to a whisper on the roof, and the wind outside began to move west. Cole's eyes grew heavy, but his hand stayed near the revolver. The storm had passed, yet his gut told him this calm was only a pause, not a peace. Far away, under the crack of thunder fading into the plains, a tree split, with a sound like the world itself tearing. Cole opened his eyes, pulse quick. "That wasn't thunder," he said. The morning after the storm was heavy with silence. Mist clung low over the ridge, gray and thick enough to hide the world beyond a few yards. The air smelled of wet pine and old smoke. Cole saddled Dustfire in the half-light, keeping one hand on the horse's neck to calm its tremor. Juniper pawed at the mud, restless, her ears twitching toward the valley. Arya tightened the strap of her cloak. "You think whoever was out there is gone?" "Maybe," Cole said. "Maybe not." They rode out before the sun broke through, following the narrow trail that twisted along the cliff's edge. The ground was slick, the slope steep enough that one wrong step would carry a man straight into the gorge below. Cole led, Dustfire sure-footed as always. Behind him, Juniper snorted, uncertain, while Arya held the reins with both hands, jaw set tight. As they climbed higher, the mist began to lift, revealing the far plains glimmering under the weak morning light. It might have been beautiful, if not for the weight pressing against Cole's chest. He could feel it, something in the air that wasn't wind. He slowed, scanning the ridge. A line of broken stone cut across the trail, fresh, edges pale against the dark soil. "Hold up," he said. Arya stopped beside him. "What is it?" "Rockslide, maybe." Before he could finish, the mountain gave a low, shuddering groan. The sound crawled up through the ground, like a heartbeat made of stone. Dustfire reared once, ears flat. Then the world tilted. Cole shouted, "Jump clear!" But the cliff face split open with a sound like thunder tearing the earth. The slope beneath them shifted, sliding out from under the horses. Dustfire lunged forward, but the trail gave way. Cole grabbed the saddle horn, felt the reins rip from his hand. A blur of movement, Juniper stumbling, Arya's cry sharp as glass. And then the sky spun sideways. Cole hit the ground hard, rolling through mud and grit. Pain seared down his shoulder. He saw Arya slip, her foot caught in a stirrup, the horse fighting for balance on the edge. "Arya!" He scrambled toward her, boots sliding, and caught her by the leg just as the earth broke loose again. The two of them tumbled into a hollow where the rocks had fallen earlier, an accidental pocket of safety carved out by chance. Dustfire's panicked whinny faded above them. The noise of the slide roared on, then slowly died into echoes. When the dust settled, the world was still again. Only the hiss of small stones tumbling down the slope. Cole's shoulder throbbed. He pushed himself up, teeth gritted. "You hurt?" Arya coughed, wiped dirt from her cheek. "No, I don't think so." She looked down at him, eyes wide. "Your arm." He glanced. Blood soaked his sleeve, a deep tear along his shoulder. He pressed his palm to it, hissed through his teeth. "It'll hold." They sat for a moment, catching breath, the world spinning quietly around them. Arya whispered, "We could have died." Cole smiled faintly, though pain tightened his jaw. "We didn't." Her eyes glistened. "You pulled me back." "Couldn't let Juniper lose her rider." She gave a small, breathless laugh, the first sound like laughter he'd heard from her. It disappeared almost immediately, but it stayed in the air between them, fragile and human. Cole looked toward the slope above. The trail was gone, buried under fresh rock and soil. "We'll have to find another way down," he said. Arya nodded, then reached out, hesitant, touched the torn fabric at his shoulder. "You're bleeding through," she murmured. He didn't pull away. "You patching me up or just pointing it out?" She tore a strip from her cloak, tied it around his arm with careful fingers. "You're impossible," she said, voice trembling just enough to betray the fear she was trying to bury, so I've been told. When she finished, her hands lingered a second longer than necessary. Then she drew back, eyes fixed on the horizon where the fog was thinning. Below them, the gorge stretched wide and bright, the river flashing silver through the rocks. Arya stared at it, her lips moving without sound. Cole caught the whisper anyway. "I'm still alive." "Yeah," he said softly. "You are." They climbed out of the hollow slowly, the sun breaking through clouds in weak streaks of gold. Juniper waited a few yards ahead, muddy but unharmed. Dustfire limped slightly, a cut on his flank. Cole rubbed the horse's neck, murmuring thanks. Then he looked toward the ridge trail that still led north. "We keep moving," he said. Arya mounted up, straight-backed now, the fear in her posture replaced by something steadier. "Where to?" "Anywhere the world forgets his name," Cole said. As they started forward, a shadow crossed the far side of the ridge. too tall for a bird, too steady to be missed. Cole turned sharply, hand on his gun. The ridge was empty, but the echo of a horse's whinny rolled faint through the valley, then vanished. "We're being followed," he said quietly. The wind carried no answer, only the distant whisper of the river they'd just escaped. Endless, patient, waiting. They reached Denver 2 days later, following the low hum of the city before it appeared. The smell of iron and smoke hit first, then the shape of brick buildings rising from the plain like some strange red harvest. Arya had never seen a city so alive and cold at once. Wagons rolling, men shouting, the clatter of hooves against cobblestone. It should have felt safe, but her pulse said otherwise. Cole guided Dustfire through the narrow street to a modest brick house with lace curtains and a porch lamp still burning, though daylight had already arrived. "My sister lives here," he said. "She doesn't ask questions unless they're worth asking." The door opened before he could knock. Nora Hartley, her hair streaked silver though she couldn't have been more than 35, smiled faintly and stepped aside. "You always bring storms when you come, Cole." He smiled back, weary but fond. "This one's worth the rain." Nora's eyes shifted to Arya, studying her without judgment. "You'll want to come in. I made coffee." Inside, the house smelled of soap and lemon oil. A man sat by the fire with papers spread across the table. Atticus Reed, Nora's husband. A lawyer with kind eyes and hands ink-stained from habit. He rose as they entered. "Cole," he said, shaking his hand. "And you must be the reason he sent word ahead." Arya hesitated, still unsure how to exist in other people's kindness. Cole stepped forward. "This is Arya Vale." The name hung there, her first time hearing it spoken in front of strangers. It settled over her like a coat that almost fit. Atticus nodded. No curiosity in his tone, only understanding. "Well then, Miss Vale, we'll see to it you're properly introduced to the world." He gestured to the chair near the fire. Papers covered it. Forms, letters, a small leather book. "Territorial. Registries are loose this side of the divide," he said. "A person disappears every week in Wyoming. Some come back under new names, some don't. I can make sure you come back as the first kind." Arya sat carefully, hands folded. "And what does that cost?" Atticus smiled. "A steady signature and a bit of faith." He slid a sheet toward her. The paper smelled faintly of ink and tobacco. At the top, the words, "Name, Arya Vale." Beneath it, lines waiting to be filled. Birthplace, occupation, intended residence. Her fingers hovered over the pen. The weight of it felt heavier than the past. Cole leaned against the mantel, arms crossed. "You don't have to," he said. "You can walk out that door and keep going. But if you're staying, make it yours." Arya swallowed, then dipped the pen into the ink. The nib scratched across the paper, shaky but sure. Arya Vale. The ink bled slightly, spreading like a bruise that wouldn't hurt. When she finished, Nora placed a hand on her shoulder. "There," she said softly. "Now the world has to learn your name again." Arya looked up, eyes glassy. Does it ever forget the old one? Nora smiled, sad and knowing. No, but you stop answering to it. The fire crackled, filling the silence. Atticus gathered the forms, sealing them with wax. It'll take a few days for the papers to clear. Stay here until then. You'll be safe. Cole nodded, grateful. We'll keep to the back room. Later, when the house quieted, Arya found herself alone at the writing desk. A blank page sat open beside a quill. She stared at it, then began to write. Dear Ivy, the words came slow, trembling. If you're reading this, then I've done something I thought I never could. I've lived. I don't know where you are, but if I can find you, I will. And if I can't, I hope the world has been kind enough in my place. A tear hit the page, warping the ink. She smiled at the imperfection, then folded the letter, sealing it with a strand of thread from her sleeve. When Cole came in, she didn't hide it. Writing to your sister? He asked. Yes, though I don't know if it'll ever reach her. Sometimes writing's not about reaching, he said quietly. It's about remembering. He set a small parcel on the desk, a loaf of bread, still warm, wrapped in linen. Eat something, he said. You look more ghost than girl. She smiled faintly. I think I'm learning how to be both. Cole didn't answer. Instead, he looked out the window. Across the street, a man in a black coat stood beneath the telegraph pole, lighting a cigar. For a heartbeat, Cole thought he saw a flash of a badge beneath the man's lapel, or maybe just the glint of a pocket watch. He moved to close the curtain, slow and deliberate. Arya noticed. What is it? Probably nothing, he said. But nothing's what I stopped believing in first. Outside, the wind carried a faint whistle between the brick alleys, echoing like someone calling a name that no longer belonged to anyone. Rain had returned to Denver by the third night. Not the violent kind from the mountains, but a soft, steady drizzle that blurred the lamps along Cherry Creek. Cole sat by the window, cleaning his revolver in silence. Every now and then, he glanced at the street below, where carriages passed through the wet light like ghosts that had forgotten they were dead. Arya sat at the table behind him, reading the book Nora had given her. A worn hymn collection, its corners bent and pages freckled with time. The flicker of the lamp made her face seem younger, softer. She hummed a tune under her breath, almost soundless. A fragile thing that might shatter if named aloud. Cole turned, voice low. What song is that? I don't know, she said. It just came. He smiled faintly. Then it's yours. Before she could answer, a knock sounded from the hallway, light, polite, but sharp enough to cut through the rain. Nora's voice called, Arya, come down a minute. There's something I'd like you to see. Arya glanced at Cole, uncertain. He nodded once. Go on. She followed Nora into the parlor. The fire there was small, the air filled with the scent of lemon oil and smoke. Nora knelt beside a wooden trunk at the base of the cabinet and unlatched it. Mother's things, she said quietly. I hadn't opened it in years, But something you said the other day about choosing your own name made me remember this. She lifted a bundle wrapped in cloth and set it gently on the table. Inside was a faded music book, its cover cracked, the edges browned by age. Nora opened it carefully, and on the first page, written in delicate ink, was a line of music and a name. Aria, the song I heard the night my first child cried. Aria stared at it, breath catching. Your mother wrote this? She did, Nora said. She used to play it on the old piano after supper. She told me once that if she ever had another daughter, she'd name her Aria. I suppose she never got the chance. The room seemed to tilt slightly, as if time itself had leaned in to listen. Aria ran her fingers over the handwriting, steady, graceful, a century of tenderness pressed into paper. She never met me, Aria said softly. Nora smiled, her eyes glistening. Maybe that's what names do, dear. They find where they're supposed to land, even if it takes a lifetime. For a long moment, no one spoke. The rain outside softened. The fire cracked once. Aria closed the book, holding it like something sacred. I thought I was stealing a name, she whispered. Turns out, it was waiting. Nora placed a hand over hers. Then it's truly yours. Later, when she returned upstairs, Cole was still at the window. He looked up when he heard her step. You were gone a while, he said. She showed him the music book. Your mother wanted a daughter named Aria. He took it carefully, turning the pages. She would have liked you, he said quietly. She believed people could start over if they were brave enough to listen to their own voice. Aria sat beside him. I didn't believe that once. Do you now? She hesitated, then nodded. I think I do. For a while they listened to the rain tapping the glass. Down in the street, a wagon rumbled past, wheels splashing through puddles. Aria looked at Cole's reflection in the window. You'll go back to the ranch after this? Maybe. The land doesn't ask questions the way people do. She smiled. Then maybe I'll come with you. He turned his head slightly, surprise flickering across his features, followed by something quieter, a warmth he didn't know how to name. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly, rolling over the rooftops. A telegraph bell clanged from the station down the street. Atticus's voice called from below. Cole, there's a message for you. Cole frowned, rising. He descended the stairs, took the folded telegram from Atticus's hand. One glance was enough. His jaw tightened. What is it? Atticus asked. Cole looked out toward the rain-streaked glass door. Jonah Pike. He's gone missing. Aria heard his boots on the steps before he reached the landing. Her hand gripped the chair's armrest. Jonah? Cole nodded, his voice low. He never filed the report. Bram's sniffing around the river again. The sound of rain filled the silence that followed, steady, patient, like a clock counting down. Aria closed the music book, holding it to her chest. Then it's not over, she said. No, Cole replied, eyes dark as the window behind him. Not yet. Outside, the telegraph bell struck again, one short, one long, and the thunder rolled closer, as if the sky itself was answering. They left Denver under a pale sky, the kind that made the land look washed clean. The storm had passed, but the air still carried the smell of rain and iron. Cole rode ahead, his eyes never leaving the road behind. Arya followed on Juniper, her hands steady now, her back straight. They didn't speak much. The rhythm of hooves and wind said all that needed saying. The trail home wound through open plains, dotted with sage and wild mustard. For days, they saw no one but hawks. On the fifth evening, the world widened again. Cedar Ridge Ranch stretched below, a patchwork of fields and fences, horses grazing near the stream. Smoke rose from the chimney of the Hartley house. Cole drew rein at the ridge and let out a long breath. "Didn't think I'd see this place again," he said. Arya looked over the valley. "It feels like it's been waiting." When they rode down, Samuel Hartley, Cole's father, was chopping wood by the barn. He paused mid-swing, squinted toward them, then smiled. His face was rough as old bark, but his eyes warmed. "Boy," he said, setting the axe down, "you finally brought something worth keeping home." Arya flushed, lowering her gaze. Rebecca, Cole's mother, came out onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. "You must be cold, dear," she said. "Come inside. Supper's near ready." Inside smelled of thyme and bread. The walls were lined with photographs faded from sun. For the first time, Arya felt no need to measure her breath. That night, after dinner, she stood on the porch, watching the moon climb over the ridge. The wind carried a faint song of crickets and the low hum of the barn lanterns. Cole joined her, leaning against the post. "She's happy you're here," he said. "So am I," Arya replied, then looked toward the stable. "Juniper's restless tonight." "Could be time," Cole said. "She's close to foaling." They stayed awake till midnight, the air cool and bright. Then, from the barn, came a soft whinny, followed by the shuffling of hooves. Cole grabbed his coat. "Come on." Inside, Juniper stood trembling, nostrils flaring, eyes wild but gentle. Cole moved slow, voice calm. Arya knelt beside, whispering softly, hands steady. A few long minutes later, a small, slick foal slipped into the straw, legs shaking, coat glistening under lantern light. "Sprig," she whispered. "He looks like new grass." Cole smiled. "Sprig it is." The foal tried to stand, fell, then tried again until he found his footing. Juniper nosed him, proud and patient. Arya brushed the mare's neck, her eyes full of quiet awe. "He's stronger than he looks," she said. "Most of us are," Cole replied. For a while they just watched the foal nuzzle against his mother. Outside, dawn touched the sky with the faintest trace of rose. Later that morning, a letter arrived. Rebecca brought it to the porch while Arya was hanging laundry. "For you, dear. No return name." Arya opened it slowly. Inside, the handwriting was clumsy but certain. "Dear Arya, I never believed you were gone. I found work in Boston at a printing house. They say you can start again if you have a name that's yours. I think I understand now. Ivy. Arya pressed the letter to her chest. Her eyes filled with tears, but not the kind she'd learned to hide. She's alive, she whispered. Cole read the words over her shoulder, smiling softly. Guess the world didn't take everything from you after all. It gave me a second life. Before he could answer, the sound of hooves came from beyond the pasture. A lone rider paused by the fence. A man in a dark coat, hat pulled low. He didn't move, didn't call out. Just raised one hand in a brief, silent gesture. Cole's eyes narrowed. Jonah, he murmured. The man tipped his hat once, then turned his horse and rode away toward the horizon. Arya watched him go, her throat tight. He's alive. Yeah, Cole said. And done running. They stood there a long time, the letter in her hand, the smell of rain still in the wind. By evening, the ranch was quiet again. Sprig slept beside Juniper. The fields glowed under the setting sun. Arya sat on the porch steps, reading Ivy's letter one more time. Cole joined her, setting a cup of coffee by her knee. You think Bram will stop? She asked softly. Cole stared toward the horizon where Jonah had disappeared. Men like him don't stop. But sometimes the world stops listening. Then maybe that's enough. The wind rustled through the tall grass, bending but never breaking it. And for the first time she let herself believe they might truly be free. Spring on Cedar Ridge didn't arrive with noise or color. It crept in quietly, like someone easing open a door to see if they were welcome. The snow withdrew inch by inch, and grass came through shyly, still damp with the memory of winter. Arya loved those mornings when the frost still clung to the edges of the fence wire, and the sunlight made it shimmer like spun glass. Every dawn began the same way. The low moo of cattle, the kettle's sigh, and the smell of bread from Rebecca's kitchen. The house had its own heartbeat now, slow, steady, content. Cole spent his days fixing fences, his shoulders bronzed by the sun. Arya kept the garden alive, her hands buried in dark soil, the edges of her nails lined with life. Sometimes she'd hum to herself, a tune from nowhere and everywhere, and even the wind seemed to pause to listen. It had been 3 years since Denver, 3 years since she'd signed her new name. Arya Vale had long stopped feeling borrowed. Now it sat easy on her tongue, like a melody she'd known since birth. The world hadn't forgotten its cruelties, but here, on this land, they had learned how to live past them. Cole built her a porch swing from spare oak boards. It creaked when the wind came down from the ridge, but Arya liked it that way. Like the house was whispering reminders that nothing perfect lasts, but good things can endure. Some nights, she'd sit there with a candle and a cup of tea, listening to the river hum beyond the meadow, feeling the faint rhythm of horses in the pasture. One dusk, the light fell amber over everything, painting Cole gold as he came up from the barn. He carried a small box, rough wood tied with string. "What's this?" Arya asked, smiling. He didn't speak right away, just looked at her with that quiet steadiness of his, the kind that could undo fear without a single word. When he opened the box, she saw a ring inside, silver, dulled by time, a little crooked. "My father wore it," he said, "and his before him. Guess I've been saving it without knowing why." Didn't answer. The air between them trembled with all the words neither needed to say. Cole took her hand, calloused and warm. "I know you don't need saving anymore. I just want to be the man you come home to." Arya felt the sting behind her eyes before she could stop it. She laughed, a sound soft and full, and said, "You already are." He slid the ring onto her finger. She, in turn, lifted the wildflower wreath she'd been weaving. Bluebells, wild clover, and a few sprigs of lavender, and placed it over his wrist. "That's for you," she said, "so you remember what gentle feels like." He chuckled low. "You think I could ever forget?" They were married under the aspens 3 weeks later. No preacher, no sermon, just the wind, the creek, and the people who'd walked the hard miles with them. Samuel and Rebecca stood to one side, their faces bright with pride. Taya rode in from the south, dust still on her coat, a hawk feather braided into her hair. Jonah stood back near the fence, hat in hand, eyes shadowed but peaceful. Taya handed Arya a small charm made of bone and string. "Feather for flight," she said, "and bone for what it costs." Arya nodded, her voice trembling. "You gave me both." When the vows were spoken, Cole didn't say much, just, "Wherever the wind stops, that's home." Arya smiled. "Then I guess we'll never stop traveling." Jonah didn't speak, only tipped his hat, the faintest hint of a smile on his weathered face. He stayed through the feast, then mounted his horse quietly, nodding once before riding off toward the setting sun. No one tried to stop him. Some men belonged to distance. The years unfolded gently after that, in the way peace tends to, unnoticed until it fills everything. Arya found herself laughing more. She sang while kneading bread, hummed while brushing Sprig's mane, and the sound of her voice became part of the ranch itself. When she looked at Cole, she saw not the man who had rescued her, but the one who had chosen to stay, the one who built safety out of silence. Sprig grew fast, full of mischief. He'd bolt through the fields with the younger horses trailing him like a living storm. Sometimes Cole would ride beside him, his hat pushed back, shouting into the wind. Arya watching from the porch, her heart too full for words. Then came the children, their first, a boy with wide eyes and stubborn hands. Samuel, named after Cole's father, and later Ada Lark, bright, curious, wild-haired. She came into the world crying so hard, the doctor laughed and said, "That one's got her mother's lungs." Years passed like that, slow enough to be savored, fast enough to disappear. On one spring morning, Arya stood in the doorway watching Cole and Samuel in the pasture. The boy was older now, his legs strong, his voice clear. He was trying to ride Sprig alone for the first time. Arya's heart stuttered with every wobble, every lean, until finally she heard her son's proud shout, "Pa! I can hold the reins myself!" Cole raised his hat and whooped, his laugh carrying clear across the field. Rebecca leaned out from the kitchen window, smiling. "He's his father's son." "And his mother's," Cole called back. Arya laughed, the sound carrying like the larks over the ridge. She glanced at Ada, sitting beside her on the steps, fingers tangled in a wreath of daisies. "Careful," Arya whispered. "You'll break the stems." Ada frowned in concentration. "I'm making it for you." When she finished, she lifted the little crown of flowers and set it on her mother's head. "Now you're the queen of the grass." Cole joined them, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Queen of my whole damn world, more like." Arya rolled her eyes but didn't argue. The three of them sat there, the late sun touching everything gold. Patch lay at their feet, muzzle gray now, tail thumping softly. Juniper grazed in the pasture, her coat silvering with age, while Sprig tossed his mane like he still owned the wind. Arya leaned her head on Cole's shoulder. "Do you ever think about before?" she asked quietly. He was silent for a moment. "Sometimes. But mostly I think about how we got here anyway." She smiled. "That's enough, isn't it?" "Yeah," he said. "It is." As twilight fell, fireflies lit the edge of the yard, small lanterns drifting through the grass. Arya rose, gathering the day's last blooms from the garden, lavender, clover, and a single wild rose. She tied them with twine and placed them on the porch rail.